2 pages of paper hit marble. That was the sound of a 7-year career ending in the most historic hearing room in America. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was still mid-laugh when Vice President JD Vance said 10 quiet words that stopped everything. "They sent you to fight. You sent them the bill." The laugh died. The pages slid off the witness table and slapped the floor. By the next morning, that sound, paper on marble in the same room where Senator Sam Ervin once questioned Nixon's men, had been replayed 41 million times. If you've ever waited for a politician to be looked in the eye under oath and asked to explain how she charged working people for her dinners while telling them she was fighting oligarchy, it just happened. And nobody in that room was ready for what came next. 3 rows back, a 54-year-old woman from Corona, Queens, Maria Lordes Vez, tightened her grip on the handles of her son's wheelchair. She had waited 11 months for this moment. Her son, Hector, 22 years old in a Queens College sweatshirt, sat beside her. He couldn't stand. He couldn't turn his head fully to the right. His eyes were locked on the seal of the United States above the dais. He hadn't blinked in 11 minutes. Senate Russell 325. The Kennedy Caucus Room. The same room where Nixon's men had faced the music in 1973. This wasn't supposed to be where Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's career unraveled. The Joint Task Force on Federal Campaign Finance Compliance had been formed 2 months earlier. Bipartisan vote, Senate banking plus House ethics, after 3 separate findings against a single sitting member of Congress, became impossible to ignore. A House ethics report, an FEC complaint, and a luxury hotel spending pattern that hit the front page of the New York Post. The presiding officer was Vice President James David Vance, Marine veteran, Yale law grad, author of Hillbilly Elegy. He was there in 2 capacities: President of the Senate under Article 1 and the Trump administration's newly designated fraud czar. The president had announced the position on Truth Social 19 days earlier. Representative Ocasio-Cortez had 3 options when the subpoena arrived: refuse and face contempt, plead the 5th, or appear under oath. She chose to appear, because Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had not lost a televised confrontation with a Republican in 7 years. She didn't believe she was going to lose this one either, especially not to a vice president who just returned from 21 hours of failed Iran negotiations in Islamabad without a single concession. She walked in at 9:48 a.m. wearing cream, the color she always wore when she intended to win. At 10:02, Chairman Tim Scott called the hearing to order. At 10:09, she made the mistake that ended everything. Chairman Scott's voice was even. He was soft-spoken. "Madam Congresswoman, you're recognized for a 5-minute opening statement." Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez didn't place her hands on the table. She stood up. She rarely sat for opening statements. She'd learned in a Bronx church basement during her 2018 primary campaign against Joe Crowley that a woman who sits is a woman who can be ignored. She began, "Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice President, with all due respect, though I'm running short of it this morning, I want to acknowledge the absurdity of this proceeding. I'm a sitting United States Congresswoman from New York. I've been brought here by a Republican-controlled task force to be questioned by a vice president who 10 days ago failed in Pakistan. 21 hours of negotiation with Iran, not one concession. If the president thought this vice president could investigate fraud, sir, he wouldn't have sent you to Pakistan to fail." She was building momentum. "You served as a Marine in Iraq from 2005 to 2006. In public affairs, sir, you were, by your own account in your memoir, a journalist with a uniform. The men beside you in Anbar earned their scars in places you only wrote about. I've read your book, sir. You may make the distinction yourself. I'm only repeating it." Then she pivoted. "You're a graduate of Yale Law. You took $15 million from Peter Thiel, a venture capitalist who said on the record he no longer believes freedom and democracy are compatible. You wrote a memoir glamorizing generational poverty, then voted to deepen it by every measure available. Your wife, Usha Chilukuri Vance, is a corporate attorney at Munger Tolls. You live in a 6,000-square-foot mansion in Cincinnati. American taxpayers paid for the renovations when the Secret Service moved in. You are, sir, a hillbilly, the way I'm a fashion designer. She turned toward the cameras. Childless cat ladies. That's what you called every woman in this country who hasn't borne a child to a man you'd approve of. You said it in 2021 on the campaign trail. I'm 36. I'm childless because I've decided not to bring a child into a country governed by men who believe the answer to a child not yet born is to deport his mother. The cadence was hers now. Donald Trump is a fascist. The American people elected a fascist. And you who in 2016 called Donald Trump America's Hitler in private texts, later released by your own former friend, you're now second in command to the man you once described as America's Adolf Hitler. You're the most expensive purchase Peter Thiel has ever made, sir. And I'm not going to be lectured by Peter Thiel's purchase about my campaign disclosures. She glanced toward Maria. I will not pretend, Mr. Vice President, to be moved by testimony from a witness who's been, let me be generous, invited here by Republican operatives whose names I don't know, but whose intentions I'm reasonably certain about. The misfortunes of one constituent, however tragic, cannot be weaponized against progressive policy by a vice president who couldn't secure the release of a single American hostage from Tehran in 21 hours. She faced the dais. I yield, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to your questions. I don't expect them to be honest. She sat down. The applause from the Democratic side of the room was absent. Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts didn't clap. Her pen had stopped moving 28 seconds into the speech. It was still stopped. Representative Mark Takano of California, ranking Democrat on House Ethics, looked down. Representative Pramila Jayapal of Washington, chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, AOC's closest legislative ally, didn't nod once. In the third row, Representative Adriano Espaillat of New York, Dominican-born, formerly undocumented, chairman of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, sat with his hands folded over a small, worn Bible his late father had given him in 1971. He closed his eyes for one full second. In the back row, Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, 6'8", wearing for the first time in 18 months a dark gray suit jacket he'd bought at Macy's in Pittsburgh 3 weeks earlier, specifically for this hearing, leaned forward and set both hands on his knees. On the Republican side, Chairman Scott didn't blink. Senator Cynthia Lummis of Wyoming wrote one word on her notepad. Senator Katie Britt of Alabama looked at her hands. Senator Pete Ricketts of Nebraska closed his binder. Senator Bill Hagerty of Tennessee leaned back. Senator Bernie Moreno of Ohio, the man who'd been sworn in to fill JD Vance's old Senate seat, didn't move. In row 4, seat 3, Maria Lordes Vez did not look up. She decided 3 weeks earlier in her Corona apartment kitchen that she wasn't going to look at Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez until the moment mattered. Beside her in seat 4 sat her son, Hector. Navy blue Queens College sweatshirt, small bleach stain on the right sleeve, wheelchair. He couldn't stand, couldn't turn his head fully. His eyes were fixed on the seal of the United States above the dais. He hadn't blinked, that anyone could tell, in 11 minutes. Chairman Scott tapped his gavel lightly. The Vice President of the United States is recognized for 7 minutes. Vice President Vance didn't stand. He'd been told by the Senate parliamentarian the day before that the Vice President, when presiding in this room, didn't need to. He placed both hands flat on the closed manila folder in front of him. He didn't open it. His voice was the voice of a man who'd grown up in a single-wide trailer in Middletown, Ohio, raised by his grandmother Bonnie, went to Ohio State on the GI Bill after 4 years in the Marines, went to Yale Law. At 31, wrote a memoir about the people who'd taught him to be quiet when there was nothing useful left to say. He spoke slowly, He didn't raise his voice. He hadn't raised his voice in a public proceeding in 3 years. Madam Congresswoman, I'm going to take some of what you said this morning, and I'm not going to fight you on it. I went to Yale Law. I took money from Peter Thiel. My wife, Usha, works at Munger Tolls. We live in East Walnut Hills, Cincinnati. The Secret Service renovated our entryway when they moved in. I called Donald Trump America's Hitler in 2016 in a private text to my friend Josh McLaurin. He's now a Democratic state senator in Georgia. He released those texts to the press in 2024 because he thought they'd hurt me. They didn't. I served as a public affairs Marine, ma'am. I was a journalist with a uniform. The men I served beside earned their scars in places I only wrote about. I've never claimed otherwise. The man I think about most often is Lance Corporal Dustin Lee, killed by an IED en route Tampa, north of Baghdad, October 7, 2006. I wasn't with him that day. I should have been. I've lived with that for 19 years. He paused. He didn't raise his voice on the next sentence. I'm not going to argue with you about Donald Trump, ma'am. I'm not going to argue about Iran, not about Peter Thiel, not about my wife, not about my children, not about 2016. The American people sorted those questions out in November 2024. They sent us here. You and me both. You from the Bronx, me from Middletown. What I'm going to ask you about, ma'am, is what they sent us to D.O. He didn't open the folder. Sitting 4 rows behind you, ma'am, in row 4, seat 3, is a woman from Corona, Queens. Her name is Mrs. Maria Lordes Vez. She was born in Aguadilla, Puerto Rico in 1971. Came to the United States with her mother in 1976 when she was 5. She's lived at 381, 127th Street in Corona since 1983. She's a public school cafeteria worker at PS 19, the Marino Jonti School, where she's worked for 22 years. She's your constituent, ma'am. She's been your constituent her whole life. She voted for you in 2018, 2020, 2022, and 2024. The young man beside her in seat 4, Queens College sweatshirt, wheelchair, is her son Hector. He's 22 years old. He hasn't been able to speak more than 3-word sentences since May 18, 2025. I'll let Mrs. Vez tell her own story when her time comes. For now, ma'am, I want you to know, I know you saw her when you walked in this morning. I know you saw her son, and I know you decided not to look. You don't have to defend the decision, ma'am. I'm just naming it. So we can begin. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's hand went to her stack of papers. It didn't move them. Not yet. Madam Congresswoman, on July 25, 2025, the House Ethics Committee, 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, chaired by Congressman Michael Guest of Mississippi, who's sitting to my right, voted unanimously, 10-0, to adopt a report concluding that you, quote, impermissibly accepted gifts associated with your attendance at the Metropolitan Museum of Art Costume Institute Gala in September 2021. Yes or no, ma'am? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez spoke carefully. The committee didn't find I knowingly violated, yes or no, ma'am? Yes. You wore a custom gown to that gala designed by Aurora James, founder of Brother Vellies. White gown. Embroidered on the back in red lettering. 3 words. Tax the rich. Yes or no? Yes. You brought your then partner, now husband, Mr. Riley Roberts. You didn't pay for his admission. The complimentary ticket was provided by Vogue magazine and Condé Nast as a gift. The committee found that under House Rule 25, accepting that ticket on his behalf was an impermissible gift to you in your official capacity. Violation of the gift rule. Yes or no? Yes. You didn't pay the designer who made your gown, ma'am, until February 2022, 5 months after the event. You didn't pay your hairstylist's invoice until late February 2022, after the agency representing the stylist sent your campaign committee written notice they'd file a Department of Labor complaint the next business day if the invoice wasn't paid. Yes or no, ma'am? Her voice was quieter. The committee, my staff. Yes or no, ma'am? Yes. The committee used a phrase I want to read into the record. They said of your payments, and I quote, "But for the Office of Congressional Conduct's investigation, several of these payments may not have been made at all." Yes or no, ma'am? A long pause. Yes. The committee ordered you to make additional payments of approximately $3,000 in personal funds to compensate for the fair market value of certain gifts you received. Have you, ma'am, as of this morning, completed those payments? My Chief of Staff has. Madam Congresswoman, with respect, I'm a tax lawyer by training. If a hairstylist had to threaten the Department of Labor to get me to pay her invoice, ma'am, I'd send her flowers and a check the next morning. You waited 8 months. You waited because somebody told you MetGala attendees don't pay for their dresses. The MetGala doesn't have a House Ethics Committee, ma'am. The United States House of Representatives does. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's hand moved to square her papers. She squared them. The papers stayed on the table. Stop for a second. Did you just hear that? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who spent 7 years on House Financial Services accusing every Republican witness of gaming the rules, just admitted under oath she waited 8 months to pay for a Met Gala dress with the words, "Tax the Rich," on the back. And she only paid after a hairstylist threatened to call the Department of Labor on her. If that just hit you the way it hit me, drop one comment below. Type the words, "Tax the Rich," TAX-THE-RICH, the slogan she wore on a borrowed dress, the dress she paid for 8 months late. Comment, "Tax the Rich" now, then come back. Because what Vice President Vance pulls out of his folder next is going to make the first 10 minutes look like a warm-up. Vice President Vance opened the manila folder. It contained 1 page. He didn't read from it. He didn't lift it. He kept his hand on it. Madam Congresswoman, I want to ask you about a separate matter. On March 27, 2026, 26 days ago, the National Legal and Policy Center, an independent ethics watchdog based in Falls Church, Virginia, filed a formal complaint with the Federal Election Commission and the House Office of Congressional Conduct. The complaint alleges that during calendar year 2025, your principal campaign committee, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for Congress, made 3 disbursements totaling $18,725 to a man named Dr. Brian W. Bewley. Did your campaign committee, ma'am, pay Dr. Bewley $18,725 during 2025? Yes. Were those payments classified in your quarterly FEC disclosures as, quote, leadership training and consulting? Yes. Dr. Bewley is a psychiatrist, ma'am. He practices at 165 Chestnut Street, Brookline, Massachusetts. According to his published practice biography on Psychology Today, he specializes in, quote, interventional psychiatry including Spravato ketamine and transcranial magnetic stimulation therapy. He's described by his own marketing materials as a leading authority on ketamine therapy. Does Dr. Bewley, on his website on Psychology Today or in any public-facing material, advertise leadership training or consulting services? Mr. Vice President, mental health is, Madam Congresswoman. I agree with you. Mental health matters. The Beatitudes, I'm a Catholic man, I converted as an adult, went through RCIA. The Beatitudes say, blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. I mourn. I've mourned. I have a mother, ma'am, who's been clean and sober for 12 years and 3 months as of this morning. I know about therapy. I know about the work it takes. The reason I'm asking this question, ma'am, is not because mental health doesn't matter. The reason I'm asking is because your donors paid for it. Federal Election Law, Title II, U.S. Code, Section 439A, subsection B, prohibits personal use of campaign funds. That's black-letter law. The NLPC alleges in its complaint that the $18,725 you paid Dr. Bewley was for personal therapeutic services for you or your campaign staff. Yes or no, ma'am, were those payments for therapy? The matter is under review by the FEC. Yes or no, ma'am? I cannot comment on an ongoing review. Vice President Vance didn't change his expression. Madam Congresswoman, the American people watching this hearing this morning are about to learn a sentence the lawyers in this room already know. The sentence, I cannot comment on an ongoing review, is the sentence a person says when the answer is yes. He paused. He hadn't raised his voice. 3 payments, ma'am. $11,550 on March 10th, 2025. $2,800 on May 15th, 2025. $4,375 on October 1st, 2025. Total, $18,725. For comparison, ma'am, and I think this is important, the median household income in your congressional district, New York's 14th, is approximately $56,000 per year. You charged your campaign donors in 3 payments, approximately 1/3 of the median annual household income in your own district, to a ketamine specialist in suburban Boston, 3 months apart, 3 times in a single year. 3 times, ma'am. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stood up. She didn't sit for fights. She hadn't sat for a fight since November 2017. She raised her hand. Chairman Scott granted her the floor. Mr. Vice President, I am not going to apologize for receiving mental health care. I'm not going to apologize for being a 36-year-old congresswoman who on January 6, 2021, was nearly murdered in her office in this very building, locked in a closet, while a mob encouraged by your now boss hunted congresswomen through these corridors looking for women to harm. I have post-traumatic stress disorder, sir. I've been treated for it. I'm not ashamed of it. The American people aren't ashamed of it. What you're doing this morning, sir, is shaming a victim of political violence for seeking the medical care she needed after a fascist insurrection. And I want to know, Mr. Vice President, when the next 18-year-old Marine veteran from Middletown, Ohio, walks into a VA clinic in Cincinnati and asks for the same ketamine treatment my donors paid for, are you going to deny him? Are you going to call his treatment a misuse of funds? Or is mental health care only fraud, Mr. Vice President, when the patient is a brown woman from the Bronx who voted against your billionaire donors? She sat down. The room was silent. Chairman Scott didn't gavel. He didn't need to. She'd landed it. It was real. It was a hit. Vice President Vance didn't speak for 14 seconds. The 14 seconds weren't the silence of a man who had nothing to say. They were the silence of a man deciding whether what had just been said deserved a response, or only an acknowledgement. He chose acknowledgement. Madam Congresswoman, I was in Middletown last weekend, ma'am. I was visiting my mother. She's 60 years old. She's been clean since January 7th, 2014. She has a job. She has a small home she pays for herself. She has, every day of her life, every right to therapy. She also pays for it, ma'am, out of her own pocket, with money she earned. She doesn't bill her donors because she's not a member of Congress. The distinction is a small one, but it matters. He turned the page over. The other side was now visible. And, ma'am, for the record, since you raised the comparison, every Marine veteran from Middletown, Ohio, who walks into a Cincinnati VA clinic and asks for ketamine therapy receives that therapy from the United States Department of Veterans Affairs, not from a private psychiatrist in Brookline, Massachusetts, not in 3 quarterly installments coded as leadership training, from the VA, free of charge to him, because we, the American people, owe him that through our taxes. He set the page back down. Now, ma'am, I want to read you something. Vice President Vance lifted the single page out of the folder and held it up for the C-SPAN cameras. The page was visible to the room. On the left, 7 dates written in a column. On the right, beside each date, the names of 7 different hotels and restaurants. Madam Congresswoman, I want to read to you, on the public record, in the United States Senate's most historic hearing room, the same room where Senator Sam Ervin sat in 1973 and asked President Nixon's men what they knew and when they knew it, a list of 7 dates. On each of these 7 dates in calendar year 2025, a woman named Mrs. Maria Lordes Vez, sitting in row 4, seat 3 behind you, called your district office at 8808 43rd Avenue, Long Island City, Queens. The phone records were obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request dated February 19, 2026. The records are in front of me. They're public. On each of those 7 dates, ma'am, the call was received by a member of your constituent services staff. On each of those 7 dates, the call was logged in your office's intake system. On each of those 7 dates, ma'am, you did not return the call personally. Your office sent a form letter signed by a constituent services aide. The 7 form letters are in front of me. They're also public. He read slowly. Each date, a hammer. Date 1, March 14th, 2025. Your campaign committee was billed $1,638 at the Hotel Vermont in Burlington, Vermont that day. Date 2, May 22nd, 2025. Your campaign committee paid Dr. Bewley $2,800. That week, your campaign committee was simultaneously billed $2,318 at the Waldorf Astoria in Las Vegas, Nevada. Date 3, July 8th, 2025. Your campaign committee was billed at the Hotel Palacio Provincial in San Juan, Puerto Rico that month. Date 4, August 26th, 2025. Your campaign committee paid the Coliseo de Puerto Rico $69,8762 in venue rental that day. The same venue, ma'am, where you were photographed dancing in a private suite during a concert performed by the recording artist Bad Bunny 3 days earlier on August 23rd. Date 5, October 1st, 2025. Your campaign committee paid Dr. Bewley $4,375 that day. Same day. Date 6, November 12th, 2025. Your campaign committee was billed at the Lansdowne Resort and Spa in Leesburg, Virginia. Date 7, February 4th, 2026. Your campaign committee paid Sushi Nakazawa on Commerce Street in Manhattan $150 per person for a 14-course tasting menu. He set the page down. Mrs. Vez was calling, ma'am, to ask for your help with her son Hector, 22 years old, sitting in row 4, seat 4 behind her, Queens College sweatshirt. Sir, would you... He stopped himself. Forgive me, sir, I forgot. You can't. A long pause. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's hand went to square her papers. The papers slid. 2 pages slipped off the polished mahogany edge of the witness table. They hit the marble floor of Russell 325. The slap of paper on marble was audible in the gallery. A C-SPAN microphone 4 meters away picked it up clearly. She watched them fall. She didn't pick them up. Hector can't stand. He can't speak more than 3 words. His mother called the congresswoman's office 7 times in 11 months. The congresswoman was at a hotel in Vermont, at a sushi bar in Manhattan, at a Bad Bunny concert in San Juan, at a resort in rural Virginia, at a ketamine specialist's office in suburban Boston. 7 phone calls, 7 form letters, 0 personal responses. If you've ever called your representative's office and gotten a form letter, share this video right now. To one person, your sister, your brother, the neighbor who owns the bodega on the corner. One person, right now. Chairman Scott looked down at his agenda. The chair calls Mrs. Maria Lordes Vez. Mrs. Vez, please come forward to the witness table. Maria stood up from row 4. She wheeled her son Hector up to the front and parked his wheelchair beside the chair to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's right. She sat down. She didn't look at the congresswoman beside her. The clerk administered the oath. Her hand didn't shake. Chairman Scott, Mrs. Vez, you're recognized for 2 minutes for an opening statement. Maria didn't have notes. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice President, members of the task force, my name is Maria Lordes Vez. I was born in Aguadilla, Puerto Rico in 1971. I came to the United States with my mother in 1976 when I was 5. I've lived in Corona, Queens since '76. Same address, 381 127th Street, since I was 12. I'm a public school cafeteria worker at PS 19, the Marino Jonte School on 48th Avenue. I've worked there 22 years. I've voted in every general election since 1992. I voted for Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden. I voted for the Congresswoman in 2018, 2020, 2022, and 2024. On May 18, 2025, my son Hector, 22 years old, a junior at Queens College, biology major planning to take the MCAT in spring 2026, was attacked from behind on the platform of the number 7 train at the 90th Street Elmhurst Avenue station. He was returning home from a study group at the Flushing Meadows branch of the Queens Library. He was wearing his Queens College sweatshirt, the same one he's wearing now. The man who had attacked him was a 28-year-old citizen of Venezuela. He'd entered the United States in May 2023 through the southern border near Eagle Pass, Texas. He'd been arrested 3 times in New York City, once for assault in the Bronx, October 2023, once for criminal possession of a weapon in Queens, March 2024, once for assault on a police officer in Brooklyn, November 2024. On each of those 3 arrests, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement filed a written detainer request with the New York City Department of Correction. On each of those 3 arrests, the New York City Department of Correction released the man without notifying ICE, in compliance with New York City's sanctuary policy that the Congresswoman has publicly defended on the floor of the House in 2019, 2021, and 2023. On May 18, 2025, that man hit my son in the back of the head with a length of metal pipe. My son fell forward onto the platform. The man hit him again and again. He stopped only when a man named Mr. David Chen, a 51-year-old maintenance supervisor from Flushing, pulled him off and held him down until the NYPD arrived. My son was hospitalized for 17 days at New York Presbyterian, Queens. He's been a resident at Burke Rehabilitation Hospital in White Plains since June 11, 2025. He cannot speak more than 3-word sentences. He has frontal lobe damage. He hasn't returned to Queens College. He will not take the MCAT. Between May 20, 2025 and February 5, 2026, I called the Congresswoman's district office 7 times. I asked each time for one thing: a meeting. I'm the Congresswoman's constituent. My son is the Congresswoman's constituent. I've voted for her 4 times. I asked for one meeting. I received 7 form letters, each one signed by a person whose name I didn't recognize. None of them was the Congresswoman. Mr. Vice President, I'm not asking for an apology. I'm not asking for the Congresswoman's resignation. I'm not asking for money. The man who hit my son is gone. The state of New York charged him. He was released on bail May 23rd. He hasn't been seen since. The Lord and ICE will deal with that. In that order, I'm asking, and I'm asking only this, that the next time the Congresswoman from my district stands on the floor of the United States House of Representatives and says the words, "Abolish ICE," she remembers that the men her policy released walked the same number 7 train my son walked. That's all I came to say. Mr. Vice President, I yield. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tried to speak. Mr. Chairman, I object to the relevance. Chairman Scott. Madam Congresswoman, the witness has not finished. You're not recognized. Maria. I'm finished, Mr. Chairman. Then the chair excuses Mrs. Vez with the gratitude of this task force. Hector hadn't moved his eyes from the seal of the United States. He hadn't moved them, that anyone in the room could tell, since the hearing began. Maria just told her story to the United States Congress, under oath, face to face with the woman whose policy her son's attacker walked free under. She didn't ask for revenge. She didn't ask for money. She didn't ask for an apology. She just wanted the American people to know. If Hector deserves to have been heard before the cameras turned off, even though he couldn't say a single word, share this video right now to one person. Your son, your daughter, the young man at your corner bus stop in the Queen's College sweatshirt, right now. Chairman Scott looked down at his agenda. The chair recognizes, on a point of personal privilege concurrent with the jurisdiction of this task force, the gentleman from the state of New York, Congressman Adriano Espaillat, chairman of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. The chair grants him 1 minute. Representative Espaillat stood up from the third row. He was 71 years old. He wore a charcoal gray suit and a small Puerto Rican flag pin on his lapel. His constituents in New York's 13th were predominantly Dominican, but his neighbors on West 186th Street in Washington Heights had been Puerto Rican for 40 years. He'd worn the pin to the swearing-in of every Puerto Rican mayor of New York City since Fernando Ferrer's primary run in 2005. He was holding the small, worn Bible his father had given him in 1971, the year he overstayed a tourist visa and entered the United States as what we now call an undocumented immigrant. He spoke slowly. He didn't look at Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice President, I'm a Democrat. I'm chairman of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. I'm a member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. I'm a senior whip of the House Democratic Caucus. I represent New York's 13th Congressional District, which sits adjacent to and shares city blocks with the district represented by the gentlewoman from New York to my left. I'm not here this morning to defend the Vice President. I voted against his confirmation as a senator from Ohio in 2023. I've voted against the legislation he's sponsored. I will continue to vote against his administration on most matters. I'm here, Mr. Chairman, because of what Mrs. Vez just said. I came to this country in 1965. I came on a tourist visa. I overstayed it. I was, for a time, a long time, what my colleagues now call an undocumented immigrant. I'm the first formerly undocumented immigrant ever elected to the United States House of Representatives. The men and women of the Hispanic Caucus elected me in November 2024, unanimously, to represent them on these matters. I'm going to say something now that I don't expect to be popular with my own caucus this afternoon. There is a difference, Madam Congresswoman, between the man who comes to this country to work, to put his children through Queen's College the way my mother put me through Queen's College in 1973, and the man who hit Hector Vez on the platform of the number 7 train. There's a difference between fighting for the dignity of the migrant and giving cover to the violent. Hector Vez is in row 4 in a wheelchair in his Queen's College sweatshirt because we, and I include myself in this, we, Madam Congresswoman, I do not exempt myself, failed to make that difference clearly enough. He turned. He faced her. Hermana, sister, I'm asking you, not as a member of the opposition, but as the chairman of the caucus you and I both belong to look at Mrs. Vez one time before this hearing ends and to say something. The word sorry is not required. The phrase, te amo, I love you, would be enough. Pause. She did not turn. Her papers were still on the floor. Mr. Chairman, I yield with sorrow. He sat down. Senator John Fetterman raised his hand. Chairman Scott recognized him. He stood up, 6'8", dark gray suit jacket, the only one he owned, sat slightly tight at the shoulders. He'd bought it 3 weeks earlier at the Macy's at South Hills Village Mall in Pittsburgh, specifically for this hearing, because his wife, Giselle, had told him that on this particular day, in this particular room, he was going to want the jacket. Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm a Democrat. I'm the senior senator from Pennsylvania. I voted against most of the Vice President's legislation when he served in this chamber. I voted against most of his administration's confirmations, with the exceptions of Marco Rubio and Lori Chavez DeRemer. I will continue to vote against most of what this White House proposes for the rest of my term. I disagree with the Vice President on the war in Ukraine. I disagree with him on Gaza. I disagree with him on Iran. I disagree with him on a great deal. I'm not here, Mr. Chairman, to defend him. I'm not here as a friend. I'm here because I served as the mayor of a town called Braddock, Pennsylvania, from January 2006 to January 2019. The median household income in Braddock during my time as mayor was approximately $27,000 per year. 38% of the children in Braddock lived below the federal poverty line. My constituents, ma'am, every single one of them, were the people the gentlewoman from New York calls the working class on her social media accounts. And I want to tell the gentlewoman from New York something on the record, on C-SPAN, in this room this morning. He didn't raise his voice. Working class people in Braddock, Pennsylvania do not stay at the Lansdowne Resort and Spa, ma'am. Working class people in Braddock do not eat $1 $50 14-course tasting menus on Commerce Street. Working class people in Braddock do not bill $23,712 to a campaign committee for a venue rental at a stadium where Bad Bunny performs. Working class people in Braddock, ma'am, called my office when I was mayor. I returned every call I could get to. When I couldn't return them, I sent a letter, a real letter with my own signature, not a rubber stamp. I'm not going to pretend, ma'am, that the working class people of this country sent you to Washington to do what you did this past year. They didn't. They sent me to Washington with the same expectation, ma'am, and I've failed them at it more times than I'm proud of. But I have not failed them with their money, not one time. I yield, Mr. Chairman. He sat down. Russell 325 was silent. It wasn't the silence of a gasp. It was quieter than that. It was the silence of recognition. A Democrat. A Democrat. The chairman of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. And another Democrat, the senior senator from Pennsylvania, the man who's worn a hoodie on the Senate floor for the last 18 months, just stood up in a Republican-led joint task force hearing and told Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, on the record, in real time, that working-class people don't live the way her donors had been paying for her to live. If you've been waiting your entire adult life for politicians to put country over party, right there on C-SPAN, with the cameras rolling, 2 of them, from her own party on her own side of the aisle. Turn on your notifications right now. Subscribe, notifications on. Because next week, another hearing room, another truth. Chairman Scott. The Vice President of the United States is recognized for the balance of his time. Vice President Vance didn't stand. A Vice President presiding doesn't stand. He had 2 minutes and 43 seconds left on his original allotment. He used 1 minute and 58 seconds. Madam Congresswoman, I'm going to do something the gentleman from New York asked you to do, ma'am, and I want you to forgive me for it, because I think it's the only thing left in me to do. I want you to know, ma'am, that I see you. I know you came to this town in January 2019. I know what it cost you. I know you walked into a building full of men who'd been here for 30 years and who decided, before you ever said a word, that you were a fool. I know what it took to face them down. I know you've been threatened. I know you were hunted in the corridors of the Capitol on January 6th, 2021. I know you've been called names in this chamber that no woman should ever be called. I'm not pretending none of that happened, ma'am. It did. It counts. But that was a while ago now. And what I want to know, and what I think Mrs. Vez wants to know, and what Hector wants to know, in whatever language he has left to him, and what Chairman Espaillat wants to know, and what Senator Fetterman wants to know, and what a whole lot of working folks in Corona and Jackson Heights and Long Island City and the South Bronx want to know, is what happened somewhere along the way between you and them. You came to the Bronx, ma'am. You ran on the train every working person in your district takes. You ran against a man named Joe Crowley who'd been here 20 years, and you said he'd forgotten what the Bronx looked like. And what the working class of your district wants to know, ma'am, what my mama, Bonnie Vance of Middletown, Ohio, would have wanted to know if she were still alive, is when you stopped riding that number 7 train. When did you stop, ma'am? I'll tell you when. Somewhere between the MetGala dress and the Waldorf Astoria and the Lansdowne Resort and the Coliseo de Puerto Rico and Sushi Nakazawa on Commerce Street. Ma'am, they sent you to Washington to fight. Madam Congresswoman. He paused for one breath. They sent you to fight. You sent them the bill. The 2 pages of paper were still on the marble floor. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stood up. Mr. Chairman, I will not be lectured. Chairman Scott gavelled once. Madam Congresswoman, you are out of order. I am not out of order. I have post-traumatic stress disorder. I've spent 7 years in this Congress. 2 gavels. Reclaiming my time, Mr. Chairman. I am reclaiming my time. Vice President Vance. Madam Congresswoman, with respect, ma'am, the gentlewoman is the witness today. The gentlewoman does not control the time. The chair does. With your permission, Mr. Chairman? Granted, Mr. Vice President. I will not be silenced. I have spent 3 gavels. The wood of the gavel cracked against the brass plate. Chairman Scott. Madam Congresswoman, the chair is going to ask the senator from Massachusetts, the senior Democrat present in this room, whether the minority has any objection to a motion to suspend the witness for the remainder of this morning. He turned. He looked at Senator Elizabeth Warren. Senator Elizabeth Warren, who'd endorsed Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in 2018, who'd campaigned with her in the South Bronx in 2020, who'd appeared with her at 3 Progressive Caucus retreats since 2023, did not stand. She didn't lift a finger. She said in a voice the C-SPAN microphones almost didn't catch, Mr. Chairman, the senator from Massachusetts has no objection to the chair's discretion. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez turned slowly toward Senator Warren. Senator Warren didn't turn back. She turned toward Adriano Espaillat. Espaillat didn't turn back. She turned toward Pramila Jayapal, the chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the woman who'd eaten dinner at her apartment in Washington 43 times in 7 years. Pramila Jayapal looked down at her hands. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's hands came down to the witness table. She didn't pick up the papers from the floor. She said, very quietly enough that the C-SPAN microphones almost didn't catch it. I yield. Chairman Scott tapped his gavel once, very gently. The witness yields. The task force will recess for 30 minutes. He set the gavel down. When the task force returned, the witness chair was empty. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had left Russell 325 through the side door that led to Constitution Avenue, alone, without speaking to a single reporter in the hallway, without issuing a statement, without looking back at the room she'd just walked out of. The 2 pages of paper were still on the marble floor. A junior Senate staffer named Camila Rodriguez, 23 years old, from Hialeah, Florida, in her first month on the job, picked them up at 12:47 that afternoon, after the afternoon panel had concluded. The pages were blank. Even her own Progressive Caucus chair wouldn't turn her head to defend her. Even Senator Elizabeth Warren, wouldn't lift a finger. If you've been waiting your entire adult life to see what real accountability looks like across party lines, on the public record, on C-SPAN, turn on your notifications and subscribe right now. Because next week, another hearing, another room, another truth. Somewhere on East 230th Street in the Bronx at 4:11 that afternoon, Maria wheeled her son Hector back through the entrance of Burke Rehabilitation Hospital. His occupational therapist, a young woman from Yonkers named Amanda Perez, asked Hector how the morning had been. Hector didn't speak for a long time. Then he said 2 words, "She came." Amanda Perez wrote the words down on his chart. Somewhere in Section 60 of Arlington National Cemetery at 3:14 Eastern Time, Vice President Vance, alone, no Secret Service photographer permitted, knelt beside the white marble headstone of Lance Corporal Dustin Lee, killed en route Tampa, north of Baghdad, October 7, 2006. He didn't say his Marine's name out loud. He'd stopped doing that 19 years ago on the advice of a chaplain at Camp Pendleton who'd understood that some prayers are better kept silent. He laid one hand on the stone. He left it there for 2 minutes. Somewhere on Dyckman Street, in the Inwood neighborhood of Upper Manhattan, at 5:53 that evening, Adriano Espaillat sat on a bench at Inwood Hill Park and looked out at the Hudson River. He had the small, worn Bible in his hands, the Bible his father had given him in 1971, the year his father had pressed $60 American into his palm at the airport in Santo Domingo and told him he wouldn't see him again until the boy was a man. He read the 7th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew. He read the verse where the Lord asks, "Why do you see the speck in your brother's eye, but don't notice the log in your own eye?" He read it again. He didn't cry. He'd cried in November 2021 when his father passed. He hadn't cried since. Somewhere on Library Avenue in Braddock, Pennsylvania, at 6:28 Eastern Time, Senator John Fetterman walked into the Braddock Carnegie Library, which he'd personally restored when he was mayor, and sat down in the children's reading room. He took off the suit jacket, put on his hoodie. He picked up the library's only copy of Hillbilly Elegy by JD Vance. He read the first chapter. He'd never read it before. Somewhere in the East Walnut Hills neighborhood of Cincinnati, Ohio, at 7:04 Eastern Time, Vice President Vance walked into his front parlor. Usha was waiting with a glass of water. His daughter, Mirabelle, 3 years old, named for Mama Bonnie, climbed onto his lap. His son, Vivek, brought a picture book. Vance read it to him. He didn't turn on the television. The hearing didn't need to be relived. When Mirabelle asked, "Daddy, you tired?" Vance said, "A little, kiddo." Mirabelle said, "Mama used to say tired is just tomorrow's job." Vance said, "She did, honey." He kept reading. Within 72 hours, Mike Casca, Chief of Staff to Representative Ocasio-Cortez, resigned. His statement, distributed to political reporters at 6:08 a.m. on a Saturday morning, didn't mention the hearing, didn't mention Maria Vez, named no one. Within a week, Representative Pramila Jayapal stepped down as chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, citing personal health reasons. Her replacement, Representative Greg Casar of Texas, declined to comment on the events of the Joint Task Force hearing when asked by Politico's Sarah Ferris. Within a week, Adriano Espaillat appeared on the Univision news program Al Punto with journalist Jorge Ramos. Ramos asked him whether he regretted his statement in Russell 3:25. Espaillat said in Spanish, "Por mi familia no, por Hector no. For my family no, for Hector no." He didn't say it twice. Within 2 weeks, the Federal Election Commission's Office of General Counsel formally accepted the National Legal and Policy Center's complaint and opened a matter under review. Dr. Brian W. Bewley's attorney, Margaret Klein of Boston, Massachusetts, issued a statement in which she said the term leadership training had been suggested by a member of the Ocasio-Cortez campaign staff, not by Dr. Bewley, and that her client didn't advertise such services because he didn't provide them. Within a month, the Q1 2026 FEC report from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for Congress disclosed 0 new luxury hotel disbursements. Within 3 months, on August 2, 2026, Representative Ocasio-Cortez issued a statement announcing she would not enter the 2028 presidential race. Her statement, released by her acting chief of staff at 6:41 a.m. on a Saturday morning, didn't mention the hearing, didn't mention Maria, didn't mention Hector, didn't mention Adriano Espaillat, didn't mention John Fetterman, didn't mention the vice president, named no one. She didn't seek a televised farewell address. She didn't request a Brookings Institution honorary fellowship, though one had reportedly been offered. She didn't publish the campaign memoir she'd reportedly been working on. Within 6 months, Senator Fetterman introduced, with formal endorsement from Vice President Vance on behalf of the Trump administration, the Federal Office Ethics Act of 2026. The bill required real-time FEC disclosure of all member campaign expenditures over $1,000. It passed the Senate 73-21 on October 14, 2026. 26 Democrats voted yes. Hector began to recover. By November 2026, he could speak in 5-word sentences. He began rehabilitation reading therapy. The book his mother selected on the recommendation of his speech therapist was a used hardcover copy of Hillbilly Elegy, which she'd purchased at the Strand bookstore on Broadway in Manhattan for $8.50. Hector read the dedication out loud, slowly, to Amanda Perez on the morning of November 17, 2026. The dedication read, "For Mama and Papa, my very own hillbilly terminators." It took him 46 seconds to read it. He didn't stop in the middle. If you made it this far, thank you. 3 things before you close this video. 1. Hit that like button. YouTube shows this video to more people when you do. And more Americans, working Americans, forgotten Americans, Americans who've spent 7 years watching what you just watched, need to hear what happened in Russell 325 this morning. 2. Comment the word accountability below. 1 word, ACCOUNTABILITY. Because this morning, in the same hearing room where Senator Sam Ervin once asked President Nixon's men what they knew and when they knew it, somebody finally showed us what the word actually looks like. I read every comment. Top comments get pinned. Comment accountability now. 3. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Because next week, another hearing, another politician, another truth that's been waiting its turn, patiently, for somebody brave enough to call it. God bless Mrs. Maria Lordes Vez of Corona, Queens. God bless her son Hector, 22 years old, who watched the seal of the United States of America above the dais this morning because he hadn't yet found the words to say what he'd come to say. God bless Mr. David Chen of Flushing, who pulled the man off Hector on the platform of the number 7 train and who hasn't been thanked publicly until this morning. God bless Chairman Adriano Espaillat of New York, who came to this country on a tourist visa in 1965 and told the truth across 30 years of friendship when the truth was the harder road. God bless Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, who put on a suit jacket for the first time in 18 months because some mornings call for one. God bless Lance Corporal Dustin Lee of Quitman, Mississippi, killed en route Tampa, October 7th, 2006, and remembered every day since by a Marine who wasn't with him. And God bless every American in every forgotten zip code of this country who has ever called a representative's office and gotten a form letter, while the representative was at a hotel her donors paid for. The gavel fell, the room emptied, the papers stayed on the floor, and the working class who had sent her to fight finally got the bill.